Hello students. Today we are going to discuss about the main significant points about Raag Darbari, and here we are taking only issues related to women representation in Raag Darbari. Now listen carefully. I am recording this video. The screen is there before you, so look at that. I'll be just reading few paragraphs and then there are main points. So this discussion part will not go in this video because the language is very simple. You can actually read out and you can make your own interpretation. So somebody was writing me, commenting me that you are simply reading. I'm just reading for your sake so you can listen it and write down out of that reading. There is not no necessary that every time we explain things. I think explanation part I'm leaving for you. You better interpret in your way and write down the explanation. So that's what I'm providing you the material. Just listen and interpret in your own way. Remember, and then appear. Do best in your exam. So let's start. It's a women question in Raag Darbari. This whole video, it will be going long enough, but this whole video is all about women presentation in Raag Darbari. The lack of significant female characters in Raag Darbari reflect the male-centric norms that prevail in rural India, where social engagement and public recognition are predominantly reserved for men. By denying women narrative agency or a voices, the novel reinforces the structural invisibility of their experience. The portrayal of rural politics in the novel depicts a world where female authority is both normalized and celebrated. The political scenes in Shivpalganj shaped by influential male figures such as Vaidji, the Sarpanch and other male elders. There you can add Thanedar also, who is also a male. And even if all the professors who are there in the college and the students are also male, and all the members of the cooperative committee and panchayat members also. So there is no female who exert control through manipulation, corruption and strategic alliances. In this environment, power is exclusively associated with masculinity, and the absence of women from public life renders them irrelevant to political affairs. The characters' conversation about governance, education and economic matters are entirely devoid of female perspective, highlighting the patriarchal control over power. The lack of female voices are also reflect the entrenched culture belief that women's participation in politics is inappropriate or unnecessary. In rural India, the political arena has long been a domain of male privilege where the idea of women prevalent is seldom even entertained. The narrative's exclusive focus on male characters emphasize how gender exclusion is deeply embodied in within these power structure. Institutions like the panchayat, which are meant to function as a democratic bodies, continue to operate under patriarchal influence, further marginalizing any potential female participation. Interestingly, while the novel's satire critique the moral decay cynicism of rural politics, it does not directly address the absence of women in a position of power. Now, these are few main points, and actually these main points are being taken from the lines paragraph which I read. So let's just wind up. Reflection of male-centric norms. The absence of significant female characters mirror the male-dominated societal norms of rural India. Social engagement and public recognition are predominantly reserved for men, sliding women's role and contribution, narrative agency and structural invisibility. Then, male-dominated political sphere, patriarchal conversation. Women are denied narrative agencies as voice, reinforcing their invisibility in societal and political structure. The novel normalize and celebrate the male authority and highlighted by Zamir's analysis of rural politics in Shivpalganj. Influential male figures like Vaidji and Sarpanch dominate the political landscape through manipulation, corruption and alliances. Power is exclusively associated with masculinity and women absent from the public life and deemed irrelevant to the political affairs. Patriarchal conversation, discussions and governance, education and economics are entirely male-driven, exclusive male perspective. This exclusion reflects extended culture belief that women's participation in politics is inappropriate or unnecessary. Now, historical context of male privilege. Rural Indian politics has historically been male-dominated domain where the notion of women's involvement is rarely considered. Then gender power structures. Institutions like panchayat, which are designed for function democratically, remain patriarchal in operation. This systematic exclusion further marginalizes any possibility of female participation in decision making, and that is why there is one word which is very famous in rural India, that is sarpanch pati. Even there are certain constituencies which are reserved for women and women are being elected as a sarpanch, but if all the decisions related to administration, economy and governance are being taken by men or particularly their husband, so they are known as sarpanch pati. So women is being only as a rubber stamp, she's being asked to sign here and there, but everything else is being done by her husband. So this is very common in India, particularly northern India, I can say. Satire and gender blindness. While the novel critique moral decay and cynicism in rural politics, it does not directly address the absence of women in power. The satire focuses on broader societal issues but overlooks the intersections of the gender and politics, leaving the systematic marginalization of women unexamined. The idea is continue. Okay, so patriarchy as an unchallenged norms. The omission of female voices reflect how patriarchy is treated as given, with male characters assuming power, control and discourses are inherently male dominated. Male-centric narrative structure. The third person narrative in Raag Darbari is ironic and focused on mocking rural life, but its perspective is entirely male. Contribution to the erasure of the female voices. Dominance of male characters. Male characters like Vadiji and Rupan dominate the plot, driving events and decisions, while women are passive figure who talked about but never allowed to speak for themselves. Silence of women. Women silence is both literal and figurative, highlighting structural mechanism that suppress female expression and reinforces their marginalization. Androcentric storytelling. The exclusion of female voices reflect the androcentric nature of storytelling, making women's absence feel normalized and inherent to the social structure. This point is significant. Even if the absence of the woman is being it's a normalized. If the women are absent, means it seems to be normal, all well, but that is not the case. So it has been represented as if it's all well, nothing special, nothing problematic. But the absence of women voice is a strong character of this novel. Reinforcement of male voices. The novel aligned with a hegemonic literary tradition that prioritize male voices, marginalizing women's experience and treating male discourses as the default. Critique without gender questioning. While the novel critiques rural corruption and manipulation, it does not address the gender power imbalance, leaving the exclusion of the woman unchallenged. And this point is made in a very significant way, that is this, we can say that Shrilal Shukla is being chauvinist or patriarch. That is not the case, because he is actually objectifying the situation. The way women are absent in the society is simply projecting that. So that these are the questions we will be dealing later on. Just listen. The lack of female perspective in Raag Darbari becomes invisible within the satire itself, revealing how narratives that aim to expose social flaws can still perpetuate the exclusion of marginalized groups. This narrative approach mirrors a broader cultural reality where silence is used as a tool of oppression, keeping women on the periphery of both public and literary spaces. When women do appear in novel, their roles are primarily symbolic or functional, serving male character interest or advancing the plot without any agency. For instance, Rupan's romantic relationship are mentioned, but the women involved are never given a voice or depth. Female characters are reduced to passive objects representing male notion of honor, respectability, or scandal. This treatment reflects how women's identities are instrumentalized within patriarchal system. The absence of a gendered voice in the narrative enforces the cultural practice of viewing women as object rather than subject. Even when they are discussed, women are framed an extension of male honor or shame, with no recognition of their own desire or perspectives. This dynamic underscore how patriarchal societies render women's identity invisible, reducing them to role that primarily serve male interest. While Raag Darbari offers a sharp critique of political and social realities of rural India, its exclusion of female voices highlight the deeply entrenched patriarchal values that shape this environment. The absence of gendered perspective is not just as a narrative oversight but a deliberate commentary on structural exclusion of women from the public life. The novel's depiction of social status reveals how power and discourses are monopolized by men. Women pushed to the margin, their experiences erased from both the public and narrative domain. Raag Darbari emphasizes the persistence of patriarchal norms, demonstrating that even moments of the social critique can perpetuate gender silence. Though its ironic narrative and satirical one, the novel exposes more decay of rural politics but leave the patriarchal structure intact, suggesting that gender exclusion is too deeply ingrained to challenge. In this way, Shrilal Shukla's work reflects not only the societal realities of rural India but also limitations of satire in addressing systematic inequalities. The erasure of the woman's voice serves as a stark reminder of how literature, like society, often overlooks the marginalized, reinforce their invisibility rather than confronting it. In Shivpalganj, all activities from the most significant to the most trivial are carried out by man. They are present everywhere in both important and mundane spaces. Only men are given names, while women are identified through their male relatives, whether father or husband. The novel's sole female character, Bela, is portrayed as a woman of low moral values and virtues. Although she is talented singing, and society demonize her as immoral, Bela is treated as an object of responsibility, one who must be quietly married off and removed from the societal scene. Her character illustrates how women are denied the opportunity to fulfill their own desire or make choices of themselves. This becomes ensured in the cycle of male desires to Shivpalganj, forces into marriage and silence for the sake of preserving the father's honor. In Shivpalganj, the education which could serve as a tool for empowerment and awareness is absent. While education exists, encourage corruption and subconsciously perpetuated, but it is available only to the village boys, not the girls. Why? Because girls are expected to fulfill domestic roles, where children serve as object of male desire. Educating them would empower them to challenge these limitations and become aware of the rights and desires, which directly conflict with desire of man in Shivpalganj. As a critique, the satire in Raag Darbari leaves out women's voices, subtly highlighting the void and exist in a rural society where men dominates not just the socio-political sphere but the narrative of life itself. So related to these paragraph, again, these are the main points. I will be only reading main points and you can read the description. Absence of significant male character, male authority in politics, exclusion of governance decision, patriarchal influence on institutions, satirical critique lacking gender focus, intersection of gender and power. So these are points which you can actually see or highlight. And the internal part is basically repetition, so I am not reading out that. Then this highlights a system so flawed that it cannot even tolerate the presence of women, let alone their upliftment. The absence of gendered voice in the novel reflects the male-dominated society in which we live, showing how the views of the desire of half of the population are neglected and silenced. No one seeks to understand or inquire these voices, which is a critical flaw of the novel itself and falls to present both sides of the story. The absence of female character ultimately exposes a flaw in Shilal Shukla critique of rural India, and it overlooks the full social spectrum, thereby weakening the narrative's impact on the readers aware of the gender equality. While Raag Darbari offers a strong critique of its socio-political context, it neglects the voices of those who have been silenced and marginalized. The marginalization of women in Raag Darbari is international, serving as a critique of the patriarchal structure that dominate the village society and political life. Shivpalganj, like many rural communities, governed by the traditional power dynamics that exclude women from political social decision making. Male figures in power such as Vedaji wield their authority without accountability, exploiting social, economic and political resources for personal gain. In this environment, women's voice and roles are systematically suppressed, rendering themselves invisible. The novel captures this by depicting women as gathering in corners, whispering among themselves while men engage in the serious discussions. This illustrates how women are neglected to domestic and private spaces with no presence in the public sphere of Shivpalganj. The absence of women from public sphere reflects the gender division of labor and space in the rural India, where women's contribution are undervalued and their voices go unheard. The conflicts, activities and alliances in the novel are most entirely driven by men. By excluding women's perspective, Raag Darbari portrays a society where gender inequality is deeply ingrained and public domain remain male-dominated space. The implications of this absence are significant. It reveals deeply rooted gender inequalities in rural India, where women are systematically excluded from the power and influence. The novel's focus on male power struggle and corruption serves as a critique not just of the individual character but of the patriarchal structure that perpetuates the marginalization of women. The absence of women's voice limits the narrative, leaving the village like a song without melody, as their perspective could have offered a more complete representation of rural life. While Raag Darbari critiques male-dominated power structure, it fails to examine how these structures impact women's lives and their struggle. Any potential resistance. Without gender perspective, the novel presents an incomplete portrayal of rural society, including women's voice could have provided a counter-narrative to the male-dominated discourses, shedding light on how patriarchal power influences all areas of village life, including the domestic and private sphere. Invisibility of women in Raag Darbari, nothing that portrayal of women are a specifically reinforced social norm, indicating their voices are silenced. Other writers' observations align with these essays' argument that suggesting the marginalization of women is not merely a narrative voice but the reflection of the broader societal attitude. She asserts the women in Raag Darbari are neglected to the background, their lives and struggles overlooked in the pursuit of the male narrative. Similarly, while male characters engage in political and social discourse, women are confined to domestic roles, enforcing a narrative new of their societal position. Bhattacharya argues by sidelining women, Raag Darbari not only silences half of the population but also create a distorted narrative that fails to capture the true fabric of rural life. The passage highlights the marginalized and systematic exclusion of women from public and political space. So I stop here because almost 15 minutes video we have recorded. You just go through this again and try to find out these points again, read out, and this will make you very comfortable in writing your answer. So thank you so much. Share the video and share the video, like and subscribe. Thank you so much.